They say some ghosts are born of tragedy, a sudden end that tethers them to a place. Others are born of rage, an injustice that death itself cannot extinguish. But some ghosts are just hungry. And in a town like Havenwood, where the days are long and the secrets are deep-fried, hunger is a dangerous thing. It all started after the incident with the Jiangshi, the hopping vampire we'd accidentally helped the townsfolk create. Life from me, my best friend Saul, and our so-called mentor Master Vane had settled into a peaceful, if mind-numbingly boring, routine.
That peace was a fragile thing. Master Vane, for his part, was still recovering. During that fiasco, he'd taken a swan dive off a roof in a misguided attempt at heroic sacrifice. He hadn't just landed, he'd crash-landed. And to add insult to injury, I, in my own panic, had fallen directly on top of him. He spent the better part of a month laid up in bed, groaning about his dignity and his bruised tailbone. Now the mere sight of a rooftop was enough to make his knees tremble. And me, I'd become, by association, a man with a crippling fear of heights. Fear, however, doesn't do much to curb bad habits. If anything, it encourages them. And our favorite bad habit was petty theft, usually for the sake of a better meal. That rainy afternoon, the three of us were huddled in Master Vane's shack, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and cheap whiskey. Our grand feast consisted of a single sour green mango. Vane took a sip of his drink, his expression hidden in the gloom. "My God," he rasped, his voice a gravelly complaint. "Whiskey with nothing but a sour mango? This is an insult to alcoholism. You two, find something, anything to go with this." I puffed out my chest, trying to look like the dependable, intelligent apprentice I clearly wasn't. I smoothed my non-existent beard. "The master is right," I declared. "This is no way to drink. Let me get the cruiser bike. I'll take you to the market. We can grab a nice big catfish, bring it back, and grill it up." The word bike triggered a traumatic memory in Vane. I saw his whole body tense up. He instinctively clutched his backside, a phantom pain shooting through his old bones. His memory might be shot, but the agonizing recollection of me pedaling him at breakneck speed over the pothole-ridden dirt road to Sal's place was seared into his brain forever. "No," he yelped, waving his hands frantically. "Absolutely not! I have to try and father a son one day. What if something happens to the family jewels? My legacy would be finished." I tried to reassure him. "Don't you worry, Master. If anything happens to you, I'll take full responsibility for, finding you a son." Saul, who had been quietly munching on mango slices, slapped me on the back. "A true hero," he said, his mouth full. Vane's composure snapped. "You little demon," he shrieked, his voice cracking. "How old are you, still talking about being my wife and bearing my children? I'll summon a legion of spirits to haunt your every waking moment." The threat of spectral torment was enough for me to back down. Okay, I'm sorry," I yelped, holding my hands up. "Just seeing you every day is scary enough. I don't need any extra ghosts, thank you very much." His posture grew more aggressive. "Are you calling me ugly, you little degenerate?" He lunged and I scrambled away, the two of us chasing each other around the tiny shack, knocking over stacks of dusty books and empty bottles. The chase ended when Vane, winded and wheezing, had to stop to chug another glass of whiskey. Saul, ever the pragmatist, brought us back to the matter at hand. "So, still no food," I sighed, defeated. "Fine, I'll go home, get my old bike, and Saul and I will go to the market. It's still light out, not a good time for borrowing anything from someone's yard." Vane nodded, his good mood instantly restored. "Excellent. Get a good one. I'll stay here and
find some spices." With that, he shuffled off. I fumed silently. That old coot wants to eat the best but won't spend a dime. Saul nudged me. "Hey, don't worry. We'll buy it and we'll split the bill with him later. He can't run."
Saul's logic was sound. We walked to my place, and I dragged my old bike from the back of the shed. It was a relic, a rusty monstrosity I rarely used. A pang of regret hit me as I thought of the sleek mountain bike I'd bought in the county seat just a few months ago, now a twisted wreck thanks to our last adventure. The two of us set off, me pedaling, Saul perched precariously on the back rack. The combination of an empty stomach and sour mangoes is a volatile one. For Saul, who had eaten the most, the consequences were arriving swiftly. As our dilapidated bike bounced through each muddy pothole, his posture grew more and more rigid. His stomach, a cauldron of acidic turmoil, was beginning to protest loudly. A low gurgle rumbled from behind me, barely audible over the squeaking of the bike chain. Saul was fighting a losing battle. Man proposes, but the gut disposes. As I swerved to avoid a particularly large pothole, a veritable duck pond in the middle of the road, the bike lurched violently. Saul's rear end bounced up and slammed back down onto the metal rack. It was the final straw.
A sharp, explosive sound, like a firecracker wrapped in wet leather, ripped through the humid air. It was a sound of liberation, a soul pushed to its absolute limit. I heard it clearly. I glanced back. "Saul, you hear something?"
Nope, didn't hear a thing."
He lied, his voice strained. I was confused. I was sure I'd heard a loud pop, a familiar sound, right when the bike hit that bump. But Saul, sitting right behind me, heard nothing? I kept pedaling, my mind racing. Then, the second wave of the attack arrived.
I sniffed the air. Once, twice, my eyes began to water. The scent was biblical, a foul, sulphurous cloud that spoke of deep-seated malevolence. It was a biological weapon, a war crime on two wheels. I turned my head again, the full, horrifying truth washing over me. "Oh, sweet mother of mercy," I gagged. "You monster! You deployed a chemical weapon without giving a warning?" Saul could only offer a pained, apologetic chuckle. "Man, I didn't see it coming either. Just hold your breath for a bit." Pedaling a heavy bike is tiring work. Pedaling while suffocating on your best friend's gaseous emissions is a near-death experience. By the time we finally reached the market, I felt like I'd aged a decade. We quickly bought a handsome-looking catfish and began the treacherous journey home, this time with Saul driving. The rain had made the dirt road slick and treacherous. My old bike, which had seemed serviceable enough on the way there, suddenly decided to show its age. We were heading down a steep slope. Saul squeezed the brakes to control our descent. The bike slowed, but then a sharp crack echoed from the handlebars. His posture went stiff. He squeezed the lever again. Nothing. The brake cable had snapped. The brake felt terrifyingly light in his hand, utterly useless. Sitting on the back, I was suddenly thrown forward as the bike shot down the hill like a rocket. "Whoa, slow down," I yelled. "What's the hurry?" Saul's silhouette was a statue of terror, his eyes locked on the bottom of the hill, where a massive, soupy mud puddle lay in wait. The bike swerved wildly before plowing straight into the puddle. Sploosh! I was launched from my seat, flying through the air with a terrified scream. Saul remained with the bike, coming to a sudden mud-caked stop, and the catfish The catfish was sent flying somewhere into the dense, thorny bushes lining the road. Back at the shack, Master Vane was getting worried. Not for our safety, of course, but for his dinner. He was afraid we ditched him. He was peering out the door when he heard the telltale squelching of our approach. He rushed out. "What in the world happened to you two? You look like you rustled a hog in a swamp." He taunted us, but we were too sore and shaken to reply. "Well, where's the fish? Hand it over. I'll cook it up. You two go get cleaned up."
Saul and I exchanged a strange, fearful glance. Our mouths opened and closed, but no words came out. Vane grew impatient. "Well, did you hear me? I asked about the fish."
I slowly brought a plastic bag out from behind my back. Inside, Vane could see the head of the catfish, uncooked, its eyes glassy, but below the head there was only a pristine, glistening skeleton. The flesh was gone. Vane was flabbergasted. "What is this? Did you two get so hungry you ate it raw on the way home? I know you're greedy, but this is a new low."
"No, that's not what happened," we both stammered, shaking our heads. My voice trembled. "We crashed. The bag flew into the bushes. We were in pain, so we just sat there for a minute before looking for it. When we found the bag, this is all that was left. What kind of dish can we make with this now, Master?"
"We can make a bone broth to go with our whiskey, I guess," Vane said dismissively, still focused on his drink. But as he finished the sentence, he paused. The joke died on his lips. He looked closer at the skeleton, a flicker of something serious, something ancient and fearful entering his eyes. He squinted. "Wait a minute. You two didn't eat this?" "How could we?" I protested. "The fish was still raw. And look at it. Who could eat a fish that cleanly, leaving only the bones in just a few minutes?" Master Vane continued to stare at the bag, his posture growing pale. "Oh, hell," he whispered, a chill in his voice that had nothing to do with the evening rain. "It seems our village has a new visitor, and I think it's hungry."
Vane sent Saul home, something about needing to protect his own chickens. As for me, he dismissed me with a wave. "Go home, you reek of mud and failure." Fine by me. The encounter with the fish skeleton had left me shaken. As I walked home, dragging my mangled bike, my mind kept replaying the image. What if that had been me in the bushes? Would I be anything more than a clean-picked skeleton right now? I shuddered, pushing the thought away as I reached my small, isolated shack. I dropped the bike, grabbed a change of clothes from the line, and headed for the outdoor shower stall I'd built in the back. Living alone, privacy wasn't a concern. I slid open the rickety wooden door and froze. My heart hammered against my ribs. Inside, sitting on a small stool with her back to me, was a woman. She had the most incredible silhouette I had ever seen. Long, flowing hair, flawless pale skin without a single mark, and a figure that could make a bishop kick a hole in a stained glass window. She wasn't wearing a stitch of clothing. My first thought was shock. My second, which followed a nanosecond later, was, how? Who? My third thought trampled the first two. Who cares?
Suddenly, a voice sweet as honeysuckle and smooth as molasses drifted from her. "What are you staring at?" she asked, a hint of shy invitation in her tone. "Come here and wash my back." I was paralyzed. I looked around the empty yard, my brain short-circuiting. Was she talking to me? "You mean me?" I stammered. She gave a slight, affirming nod, still facing away.
That was it. My brain shut down completely. This beautiful creature had not only appeared in my shower, but was now inviting me in. What gentleman could refuse? I dropped my clean clothes onto the dirt floor and took a tentative step forward, my voice thick with desire. "Then let me wash you." She nodded again. This had to be a dream. Maybe I hit my head in the crash. If so, I never wanted to wake up.
I picked up the wooden dipper, my hands trembling, and poured cool water over her perfect milky white back. My mind was racing. I could marry her. Right here, right now. This is a sign. I was so lost in my fantasy that I failed to register the faint, cloying scent of old books and cheap whiskey that seemed to hang in the air. "Now, scrub my back," the sweet voice commanded.
"Of course," I whispered. I placed my hand on her back, ready to feel that soft skin, but what I felt was wrong. It wasn't smooth, it was rough, bumpy, and strangely familiar. I pulled my hand back, confused. Your back, it feels a little coarse," I said, immediately regretting my lack of tact. In front of me, her back was still visually perfect, a canvas of pale white, but the sensation on my fingertips told a different story. It was a texture I knew, but couldn't quite place.
I tried again, closing my eyes to focus on the sensation. It was leathery, with odd bumps, like old calluses, or maybe warts. Where had I felt that before? The figure seemed to sense my confusion. Slowly, she began to turn her head. My heart pounded in anticipation, ready to see the face of an angel. The head turned and turned, and as the face came into view, my world collapsed. It was the wrinkled, leathery, grinning face of Master Vane. "Oh, sweet heaven, no!" I screamed, scrambling backwards and falling into the mud. "Master Vane, forgive me! I'll help you catch the ghost, I swear!"
Miles away, in his own shack, Master Vane sat cross-legged on the floor, a disgusting, triumphant grin spreading across his face. He whispered to the empty room, "That's more like it, my good apprentice. Now for the other one." Back at my place, the illusion had vanished. I was left shivering in the mud, humiliated and horrified. The worst part? There are some things you can't unfeel. I knew he'd pranked me for trying to ditch him, and I knew I had to go help. But I also knew I needed a real shower. With bleach.
When I finally arrived at Vane's shack, mortified and reeking of betrayal, Saul was already there. I could tell from his expression that he'd received a similar, personalized spectral summons. Vane greeted me with a sleazy wink. "Oh, Benny, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be at home, tending to your new bride?" I lunged to cover his mouth before he could say more in front of Saul, my face burning with a shame so intense I thought I might actually cry.
After a few minutes of me trying to strangle him, Vane got down to business. "It's a hungry ghost," he stated, all traces of humor gone. "It can manifest even in daylight, which means it's powerful. The question is, what does it eat?" He looked at us expectantly. Saul, surprisingly, was the first to connect the dots. "The catfish, Master! The catfish was raw, wasn't it? So, it only eats raw things?" Vane's face, hidden in the shadows, seemed to light up. "Exactly. At least one of you has a brain. For now, we assume it only eats raw food. But some of these things aren't picky. They are the souls of those who died uncared for, left to rot on the roadside. They become ghosts, then demons, driven by a hunger to harm the living." Saul didn't seem too bothered. What mattered most to him was the flock of chickens he and his wife kept. As long as the ghost wasn't after cooked food, his assets were safe. After a bit more discussion, Vane, seeing our nerves were still shot, changed the subject to something more familiar. "Tonight," Saul said, a greedy glint in his posture,
We should pay a visit to Old Man Hemlock's place. His apple trees are heavy with fruit. I hear they're incredibly sweet." Vane practically drooled. "Are they really? Sweet, you say?" "As sweet and firm," Saul added poetically, "as Mrs. Gable's prize-winning melons." Vane smacked him on the head. "Focus! We're stealing apples, not watermelons." And just like that, it was decided. Tonight, we'd go scrumping.
Later that night, under the cloak of a moonless sky, the three of us were crouched by the fence of Old Man Hemlock's. Hemlock was a notorious miser who grew the best fruit in the county, but never shared a bite. His orchard was our favorite target. "All right, you two," Vane whispered, assuming his usual supervisory role. "You go in, I'll keep watch out here." "How come you always get lookout duty?" I grumbled. "Because I'm old, and you owe me for the emotional trauma," he retorted. "Now get in there." Sal and I exchanged a sigh and slipped through a gap in the fence.
We moved stealthily through the overgrown grass, the air thick and silent. The house was a dark, intimidating lump against the sky, every window black as pitch. We reached the nearest apple tree, its branches laden with fruit. I whispered to Sal, "You climb first." He nodded and scrambled up the trunk. I followed close behind. We didn't know that we weren't alone. Another figure, silent and weightless, had followed us up into the dense canopy. Forgetting to bring a bag, I improvised, pulling up the hem of my shirt to make a pouch. I started picking the biggest, ripest apples I could reach, dropping them one by one into my makeshift bag. After a dozen or so, I paused. My shirt felt light, almost empty. Confused, I held it open and looked inside. It was empty. Not a single apple. What the hell, I thought, looking down at the ground. It was too dark to see if they'd fallen out.
I knotted the bottom of my shirt to be more secure and went back to picking. I'd pick an apple, carefully place it inside the pouch, and then reach for another. I didn't see the other, thinner hand that would silently dip into my shirt, retrieve the fruit, and disappear back into the leaves, followed by a faint, wet, crunching sound. I heard the chewing and assumed it was Saul. I hissed at him, "Hey, you want to get us caught? Stop eating."
Saul, who had been concentrating intently on not falling, nearly jumped out of his skin. He almost lost his grip, wobbling precariously. "Caught for what?" he whispered back frantically. "I'm not doing anything." "Liar, you're eating. Stop it before he hears us." "I'm not eating. You just scared the hell out of me." I grumbled, but let it go. I went back to picking, and the phantom hand went back to stealing. The quiet crunch, 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 continuing from somewhere just above my head.
Eventually, my shirt started to feel heavy. I figured I had enough. I found a particularly fruitful branch and started picking rapidly, trying to get done. My hand went into my shirt pouch at the same time the other hand did. Our fingers brushed. It was cold, bone-chillingly cold, and thin. I yelped, forgetting to be quiet. "What the hell are you doing? Stop grabbing my apples!" Saul, on a different branch, jumped. "What are you yelling about? You're going to get us caught!" But it was too late. A light flicked on in the house. The back door flew open. "Who's out there?" a gravelly voice roared. "Who's stealing my apples? Get down here before I beat you to a pulp!"
It was Old Man Hemlock, and he was holding a baseball bat. Saul and I froze, pressing ourselves flat against the branches, hoping the darkness would hide us. Hemlock stormed to the base of our tree. "I know you're up there. Come on down and I'll go easy on ya." We didn't move a muscle, but then his threat turned to a gasp. His eyes, now adjusted to the dark, had spotted a figure. "I see you!" he yelled. We thought he meant us, but he was looking at a different branch. A figure was sitting there, legs dangling, slowly looking down. A pair of glowing red eyes met his. "Ghost!" Hemlock shrieked. He dropped the bat and ran for his life, stumbling back into his house and slamming the door shut. We heard the sound of multiple bolts being thrown. Saul and I looked at each other.
baffled but relieved. We scrambled down the tree, our bag of stolen apples forgotten. As we crept towards the fence, I heard a faint giggle behind me. "What are you laughing at?" I whispered to Saul as he bumped into my back. "That wasn't me," he said, his voice trembling. "It sounded like a woman."
And then we both heard it. A high-pitched, cackling laugh that echoed from the tree we'd just left. It wasn't human. We didn't wait to investigate. We screamed, threw our one bag of apples over the fence, and scrambled after it. The bag hit something soft with a loud thwack. It was Vane. We'd knocked him out cold. After we revived him and explained about the ghost, he demanded compensation for his pain and suffering. "I get the biggest apple," he declared, rubbing his bruised face. Saul, with a sly look I didn't understand, picked up the biggest, most perfect-looking apple from the ground and handed it to him. Vane bit into it. His chewing slowed, then stopped. A look of profound confusion, followed by utter disgust, contorted his unseen features. He spat out the mouthful. "You monsters! What is this?" He didn't see what Saul and I saw. When he was knocked out, that perfect apple had rolled directly into a fresh pile of cow dung next to the road. Saul had simply picked it up, wiped it on his pants, and served it. Justice, like our apples, was sometimes best served dirty.
The next afternoon, I went to check on Saul. I found him in the middle of a domestic crisis. His wife, Maria, had just gotten home from visiting her folks. As I walked in, she was letting out a wail of despair that rattled the windows. In the middle of their kitchen, on the stove, was the enormous pot they only used for boiling crawfish at the town fair. It was full to the brim with water, and floating inside, bumping against each other in the bubbling water, was their entire flock of chickens, now bald, pale, and thoroughly cooked. "My chickens!" Maria sobbed. "My nest egg, all boiled!" Sal, bless his idiotic heart, tried to calm her down, puffing his chest out proudly. "But honey, I saved them. Master Vane said the ghost only eats raw food, so I cooked them, all of them. Now they're safe. See how smart I am?" The sound of Maria slapping him was, I had to admit, immensely satisfying. The next thing I knew, I was helping a teary-eyed Sal push a wheelbarrow full of boiled chicken to the market to try and salvage some of their losses.
Meanwhile, the ghost continued its work. The news of its existence started to trickle through Havenwood, mostly thanks to Mac, one of the town's most dedicated drunks. One night, stumbling home from a session at the local watering hole, he took a wrong turn and ended up at the bottom of the same muddy slope where we'd crashed. In his drunken stupor, he saw a figure kneeling on the road. It was an old woman, looking frail and strange. "Hey," he slurred, stumbling closer. "What are you doing out here, old-timer?" The figure didn't respond. The wind picked up and Mac shivered. He was about to leave when a raspy voice drifted from the kneeling form. "Please, sir, I'm so hungry. Give me something to eat."
Mac, being drunk but not heartless, was about to offer to walk her home when his stomach churned. The cheap whiskey and pickled eggs he'd been consuming all night decided it was time for an encore performance. He doubled over and vomited spectacularly, right at the old woman's feet. As he wiped his mouth, gasping, he looked up and sobered up instantly. The old woman's head was now raised, her eyes glowing a hellish red. She smiled a wide, impossible smile, reached her long, spindly fingers towards the vile puddle he'd just created, and spoke in that same chilling voice. "Oh, thank you, Sonny. This looks delicious." Mac didn't stick around for dessert. His screams echoed all the way back to town.
Mac's story, however disgusting, gave us the final piece of the puzzle. The ghost's lair was the crash site. That night, we gathered to form a plan. "It's time to end this," Vane declared. "Here's what we do. I'll give you a net, magically reinforced. You two will take a cooked chicken, and for God's sake, don't eat this one, and place it at the crash site. When you see the chicken being disturbed, you throw the net. I will be nearby, meditating, preparing the final ritual." "Why don't you come with us?" Saul whined. "Because I'm the master shaman," Vane snapped. "My presence would scare it off. Now, take these protective talismans, and don't mess this up." His "not messing this up" speeches were usually a guarantee that we would, in fact, mess this up spectacularly.
We set the trap. We placed the chicken in the middle of the road and dove into the bushes. We waited and waited. My stomach grumbled. That chicken smelled incredible. No, I told myself, don't be like Saul. Suddenly, there was a rustling from the other side of the road. I saw a dark shape emerge from the woods. It was stooped, moving slowly, drawn to the chicken. "This is it," I thought. I didn't hesitate. "Now!" I yelled, leaping from the bushes with the net held high.
"I got you, you demon!" I screamed, tackling the figure and trapping it in the net. The ghost struggled, letting out muffled cries. It felt surprisingly solid. I pulled off my sandal and started whacking the tangled shape for good measure. "Take that, and that!" It was only when I heard a very familiar string of curses that I paused. I pulled back the net. It was Saul. He'd gotten hungry and had tried to sneak a leg off the bait chicken. "Why," he groaned, a new lump forming on his head, "do you always hit me?"
Before I could answer, Master Vane appeared, sighing the sigh of a man burdened by fools. "You two are useless," he said, pulling a new bag from his robes. It was full of sliced roast beef. "I knew you'd fail. Let's try again." As we were setting up, we were unaware of another player entering the field. Madame LaRue, Havenwood's self-proclaimed psychic, had heard the ghost stories and saw a chance to cement her fame. Thinking we were all amateurs, she decided to handle the ghost herself. She arrived at the clearing, saw the delicious-looking beef sitting unattended, and, like Saul, her greed overcame her non-existent professionalism.
"It's here," Saul hissed, pointing at the figure snatching the meat. This time, we both charged. We threw the net, making a perfect capture. A torrent of enraged, surprisingly high-pitched shrieks erupted from the bundle. We opened the net to find a furious Madame LaRue. "What is the meaning of this?" she shrieked. Just then, Vane stepped out of the shadows. "LaRue," he said calmly, "playing with things you don't understand, I see."
As he spoke, the temperature dropped. A real wind, cold and smelling of grave dirt, swirled around us. A voice whispered on the wind from all directions at once. "So hungry." The figure of the old woman from Mac's story coalesced out of the shadows, but this time she wasn't pretending. Her form twisted and warped, her limbs elongating, her jaw unhinging. Her red eyes locked onto us. Madame LaRue took one look, screamed "nope," and ran so fast she left her cheap jewelry behind. Saul and I weren't far behind her in spirit. We were frozen with sheer terror.
"Benny!" Vane yelled, holding a glowing red talisman forward. The ghost recoiled slightly.
"The vial, the prepared holy water, give it to me now!"
I fumbled in my pockets. The bottle wasn't there. I'd left it by the first bait chicken. Vane saw my panic. "Don't tell me you forgot it," he shrieked, never taking his eyes off the advancing ghoul. "I need a potent liquid agent, now! Improvise!" My mind went completely blank. All I heard was potent liquid agent. All I felt was the terror of the monster in front of me and the pressure of a very, very full bladder from all the nervous waiting. In that moment of pure, pants-wetting fear, my body chose the most direct solution. I fumbled with my zipper, and with a cry of panicked desperation, I improvised. Vane didn't even have time to turn around. He just stiffened as a warm, powerful stream of holy water soaked him from his head to his shoes. There was a moment of stunned silence from everyone, including the ghost. Vane, dripping and smelling faintly of asparagus, slowly turned his head. The look he gave me could curdle milk from a mile away. "You," he whispered, his voice dangerously calm. Then, shaking with rage, he turned back to the ghost. "Fine, if it has to be this way." He began chanting, throwing his own, now thoroughly consecrated talisman at the ghost. Ropes of spiritual energy erupted from the ground, wrapping around the ghoul, which shrieked and thrashed but could not break free.
Trapped, the ghost's rage subsided, replaced by a deep sadness. She told us her story, a lonely old woman with no family who had starved to death in a harsh winter, her body undiscovered for weeks. Her hunger had followed her into death. Vane, his anger momentarily forgotten in a rare flash of pity, promised to give her a proper resting place and offerings so she would never be hungry again. The spirit nodded gratefully and allowed him to guide her into a spirit box.
The crisis was over. Madame Leroux gave up the psychic business and opened a bakery. Saul and I were heroes. Sort of. But I knew Vane wouldn't let my transgression slide. A few nights later, I came home exhausted and found another beautiful woman in my house, this time lying on my bed. My heart leaped. Had my luck finally turned? Forgetting everything I'd learned, I leaned in close, whispering, "Hello there." The figure turned its head, and once again I was greeted by the leering, wrinkle-faced silhouette of my master. "Looking for some more holy water, apprentice?" he cackled. I screamed. Some debts, I learned, are never truly paid.